Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Shabbos Daf Kuf contains 4 Mishnayos. From the beginning of the Daf until the first Mishnah discusses more shaylas about destroying the Rishus Harabim or creating it or destroying the Rishus Yachid as you transfer into it. The Mishnah then discusses throwing an object 4 amos and hitting a wall. The Gemara explains it. Next Mishnah is about if you throw an object and the wind moves it, it doesn't land where you intended it to. The Gemara explains that as well. Then you have a Mishnah about the sea. What happens if the sea crosses your Rishus Harabim? What is that halacha? And then the fourth Mishnah discusses if you're transferring from the sea to a ship, from the sea to land, or vice versa, and how you draw water. The Gemara will explain from the sea into the ship without violating Hilchos Shabbos. First of all, the Gemara has a number of shaylas which are very similar to issues which we discussed in the Daf previously. So we're going to have 3 separate things. The first one is concerning things floating on water. So we had said that if you have an object floating in the water, it's not considered at rest. So if you lift it up, you do not do an akira. On the other hand, if you have water on top of water, it is considered at rest because all the water is considered one unit. The next question in our Gemara now is, what if you have oil floating on top of wine? Is that considered one unit, or is that considered 2 separate units, and therefore the oil which is floating on the wine is not at rest, and if you lift it up, you have not performed an akira? So Gemara says that it is a machlokes between Rav Yochanan ben Nuri and the Rabbanon. And their case is not concerning carrying a Shabbos, it's concerning Tumah. We have a Tful Yoim, who is a person who is Tameh to some extent, who touches oil floating on top of wine. So he made the oil Tameh, because that's what he touched, but not the wine, because it's considered a separate unit. And therefore he would say that concerning Shabbos also, it's also considered a separate unit. Okay, that's that subject. The next issue is about the next 2 issues are about where you transfer an object from Rishus to Rishus, and doing so you destroy the Rishus that it was transferred into. So the case, first of all, is where you threw a mat into a pit. The pit was 10 tefachim deep, and it was wide. So if it was 8 tefachim wide and the mat fell on the bottom of the pit, so it didn't destroy anything, so everything's fine. Now, what if you threw it in a way that it neatly cut the pit in half, and now you have 2 sections that are both slightly less than 4 tefachim wide. So you do not have Rishus Yachid anymore. You need to have a minimum of 4 tefachim wide by 10 tefachim deep to be considered a Rishus Yachid. So Gemara says this is a statement of Abaye, and Abaye says that is clearly he's not chayiv because he has not performed the Neshus D'Oraisa, he has destroyed the Rishus Yachid as he transferred an object into it. Now we had seen earlier that Rav Yochanan wasn't sure about a very similar case where he put a shovelful of sand from outside a pit to inside the pit, and now it was no longer 10 tefachim deep when it landed. So the Gemara says, first of all, Abaye is sure, Rav Yochanan's not, but there's another difference as well. Abaye's case was a mat. Who says a mat becomes part of the pit and has the power to redefine the dimensions of the pit? Maybe it's considered to be an object in the pit, but the pit retains its same dimensions. Abaye is convinced that the mat becomes part of the pit and it defines its walls, and now the dimensions are different. Instead of having 10 tvachim deep and 8 tvachim wide pit with a mat in it, you have 2 separate pits, each slightly less than 4 tvachim wide. Rabbi Yochanan was referring to a case of the dirt that you threw into the pit. That's much more likely to be understood that it changes the dimensions of the pit. It becomes part of the walls of the pit. So now Abaye was sure about a case of mat. He would certainly be sure that the case of the dirt, that it becomes part of the pit. Rabbi Yochanan, who wasn't sure about the case of the dirt, would also so sure about the mat. In fact, the Gemara says he certainly would say that a mat doesn't become part of the walls of the pit. That's why I didn't discuss that case. He would just say that the mat is not really changing the dimensions of the pit. And now we have another statement from Abaye on the subject, and that's again about which objects are considered to stay there and become part of the pit and change the dimensions of the pit. So Abaye says if you have a pit which is 10 tvachim deep and 4 tvachim wide, it's the right size, but it's full. So if it's full of water, so the water doesn't change the dimensions of the pit is still considered to be the same size, it just happens to have water in it. And the reason for that is that you can still put things inside the pit and it sinks to the bottom. However, if it's filled with fruit, so now we view it as if the pit is filled up, and it is no longer 10 tvachim by 4 tvachim. It's considered full and considered flat. And we have a brisa that supports that. The brisa says that if somebody throws an object from a road into the sea, or vice versa, so it's not us, or he has not performed an Isser Daraisa, it is an Isser Darbanan, because the sea is a Carmelis, it's not a Rishas Yachid. The highway is a Rishas Rabbin. Now Rav Shimon says that if there was a hole in the sea, 10 Tvachim deep, and 4 Tvachim wide, and the object falls into there, said that's a Rishas Yachid, even though it's filled with water. It's the middle of the sea, so it's filled with water, but it's a Rishas Yachid in the sea, and therefore it is an Isser Daraisa, transferring from Rishas Rabbin to Rishas Yachid. This takes us to the next Mishnah. The Mishnah discusses the famous case of somebody threw an object 4 amos in Rishas Rabbin and it stuck to the wall. And the Gemara will have the famous discussion on it, which we have seen many times thus far in the Masechta. And then we will have 2 halachos in the Gemara, both of which will be corroborated by a brisa. So first of all, the Mishnah says that somebody threw an object 4 amos in a Rishas Rabbin. So as we know, moving an object 4 amos throughout Rishas Rabbin, even though it doesn't go from Rishas to Rishas, also counts as the Isser of carrying. This guy was standing exactly 4 amos away from a wall, and he threw it, and it hit the wall. So the Mishnah says if it hit above 10 Tvachim, so then it landed in a Makom Petur. Above 10 Tvachim is not a Rishas Rabbin. So then he didn't do any Yisr Daraisa. If, however, landed below 10 Tvachim, so then it's in the Rishas Rabbim, and it moved 4 amos, and therefore he is Chayiv, he performed an Yisr Daraisa. Now, if he throws it normally and it lands 4 amos away on the ground, obviously then that is also the Yisr Daraisa of carrying. So the Gemara says, hold on a second. You said when it hit the wall below 10 Tvachim high, it's an Isser Daraisa. How could that be? It certainly bounced back and landed. When it finally came to rest, when the Hanacha happened, it was within 4 amos of the person who threw it. So the Gemara says we're referring to a sticky object like a pressed cake of figs, and it stuck to the wall, and therefore it didn't bounce back. It flew exactly 4 amos, and that's where it stayed. Okay, now the Gemara has the 2 halachas. First of all, we'll have the halacha of a crack in the wall. What if the object landed in a crack in the wall? So, the wall itself is a Rishas Yachid. If it lands in a crack in the wall, so had it landed on top of the wall, it would have been Rishas Hayachid for sure. But a crack in the wall, the problem is that it's not 10 Tvachim wide. So the Gemara says this is dependent on the Machlokes between Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Meir about whether you view a small nook in a wall as being the full size. Do you consider it to be large enough, even though it's not large enough? This halacha, this machlokes, is in Hilchos Mezuzah. In order for a doorway to be obligated to have a mezuzah, it's got to be a minimum of 10 Tvachim high and 4 Tvachim wide. What if you have an archway, which the center of the arch stretches to 10 Tvachim high, and the bottom of the arch stretches to 4 Tvachim wide, but it curves to a level that it doesn't fill the entire 10 by 4 all the way up? So according to Rabbi Meir, you view as if it is open, and therefore it is large enough, and it is obligated to have a mezuzah. According to the Rabban, you don't view it as if it is open, and therefore it doesn't need a mezuzah. So the Gemara says, and the Gemara brings a brisa which supports this, that the same halachas would apply here. Do we view the crack as being 4 Tvachim wide, and therefore since it's 10 Tvachim high, it also counts as a Rishos Hayachid? Okay. Next halacha the Gemara brings is about a slope. What is a halacha of a slope? Does that count as a wall? So the Gemara says in order for it to count as a wall, it has to rise 10 Tvachim, of course, just like any wall rises 10 Tvachim, but it has to be steep enough that it rises 10 Tvachim within the span of 4 amos, measured along the slope, not measured perpendicular to the rise. Okay, now the Gemara has a brisa which says this explicitly, and the brisa has 2 cases. They are in agreement. They say the same halacha. If you have a mavoi, which is like a street next to Rishos Rabbim, except that when the mavoi meets Rishos Rabbim, there's a slope. It goes either up or it goes down from Rishos Rabbim to the mavoi. So you do not need a lechi or a korah to close off the mavoi. That mavoi, since we're assuming that it's closed on the other 3 sides, like most mavois are, so the side which borders Rishos Rabbim has a slope. If that slope is steep enough, so it counts as if there's a wall there, and the entire mavoi is therefore cordoned off, and it is a Rishos Yachid. You don't have to worry about it. And Ram Gamliel says that if you have a little hill, Reb Chanina ben Gamliel says if you have a little hill with the same type of slopes, it counts as Rishus HaYachid, and you throw anything on top of it, it would be an Issa D'Oraisa of transferring from Rishus to Rishus. And this takes us to the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah continues to discuss an object which was thrown 4 Amos in Rishus HaRabim, and in this Mishnah, the object was caught by the wind. We'll see how that changes the halacha. Rabbi Yochanan will explain the Mishnah, then the Gemara will have a statement of Rava. The Gemara will feel like that is redundant based on what Rabbi Yochanan says, and the Gemara will see why we still need it. So first of all, the Mishnah says that somebody throws an object, and it doesn't land where he threw it to, where the force of his throwing would have carried it to, because of the wind blowing it either closer or further. So the halacha follows where he would have thrown it to and not where the wind throws it to. So therefore, for example, if he throws it and it is intending to fly with enough force to fly 4 amas or more, but the wind blows it back within 4 amas, so he's chayiv anyway. He violated the Isser D'Oraisa because he threw it to 4 amas away. It doesn't matter that the wind blew it closer. On the other hand, if he threw it less, let's say 3 amas, and then the wind blows it out to further, while it's in the air, the wind, he carries it to further than 4 amas, he didn't do an Isser D'Oraisa because his throwing would not have carried it that far. So the Gemara has a question. In the case where he threw it further, and you said he's chayiv, how could you say he's chayiv? It never landed 4 amas away. The wind blew it in. So what's he chayiv for exactly? Okay, his force of throwing would have carried it, but that never happened. There was no hanacha. So Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan says we have to be referring to a case where the object did stop moving at some point. Either it landed and then the wind blew it again, 4 amas away, it landed and the wind blew it closer, or the wind froze it in the air before carrying it closer. So it did stop moving at some point 4 amas away. Now we have a brisa which shows us clearly. The brisa discusses the same case. So somebody threw an object to a point 4 amas away and the wind blew it closer. This brisa says he's not chayv. He did not do an Isser D'Oraisa unless the wind froze the object in the air for a while and then brought it back within the 4 amas. Then there is a hanacha, it stops moving when the wind is holding it 4 amas away. Okay, now the Gemara has a statement of Rava, going back to a different discussion and a machlokes we had on Daf Tzadi Zayin. The Gemara is going to say that Rava's halacha is redundant once we have Rabbi Yochanan. Rava is referring to machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim about somebody throws an object from Rishus HaYachid to another Rishus HaYachid passing through Rishus HaRabim. And the Rabbanon had said that he didn't do any Isser. We view the object, he didn't do any Isser D'Oraisa. The object went from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaYachid. The fact that it passed through Rishus HaRabim is not a problem. And now Rava says that the Rabbanon would say that even if it flew through Rishus HaRabim within 3 tvachim of the ground. Meaning that being within 3 tvachim of the ground does not mean that it's halachically viewed like it landed. Even though it's within lavud of the ground, it was still in flying, and therefore the Rabbanon would say even in that case that there is no hanacha in the Rishus HaRabim as it passed through, even though it was within 3 tvachim, it didn't stop, not physically and not halachically. So the Gemara says, so this is obvious from what Rabbi Yochanan said. Why did Rabbi Yochanan have to say that our Mishnah was referring to a case where the object stopped moving? Right, Rabbi Yochanan one was Rav Yochanan who was trying to explain our Mishnah, who said that when the object was blown back within 4 amas, anyway, why do you have to say that it froze, the object stopped moving 4 amas away? Why don't you just say that it passed to within 3 tvachim of the ground 4 amas away, and then it blew back in, meaning he threw the object, it arched to 4 amas away, 4 amas away, let's be clear, 4 amas away, and while it was landing within 3 tvachim of the ground, the wind blew it back within 4 amas away. So, if Rava's statement hadn't been true, Rabbi Yochanan would have been able to say that. Obviously, we could learn from what Rabbi Yochanan said that the fact that it's within 3 tvachim of the ground does not mean that it's considered like it landed, and therefore what Rava said is extra. So Gemara says no, there's a very big difference. Rabbi Yochanan didn't say that when it's within 3 tvachim of the ground it counts as landed because there it's being held by the wind. It's victim to the wind, and you don't know where it's going to land. So you don't say that it's considered like it's landed already when it's within 3 tvachim of the ground because you don't know where it's actually going to land. However, in Rava's case, the object is landing. So if it's going to land, so I say as soon as it enters to within 3 tvachim, it's already landed. It doesn't have to land all the way. Now there's a problem here, and that's that in Rava's case, the object wasn't flying wasn't planning to land in Rosh Hashanah. It was going to fly through Rosh Hashanah and land in Rosh Hashanah. So Rashi says that we're not discussing that case specifically. We're applying Rava's halacha to a different case, and that's what we're arguing about. We're applying it to the case where somebody threw something, and he threw 4 amos in Rosh Hashanah and it landed in Rosh Hashanah. However, he threw it without realizing that it was usher to do on Shabbos. And then, as it was landing, he realized. Now, the question is, does he have to bring a carbon? You only have to bring a carbon chatas if the entire Isser was performed while he didn't know that the thing was usher. This guy found out that it was usher before it landed. So Rava says that if it didn't actually land yet, the Isser is not over, and therefore he doesn't have to bring a carbon chatas, even though it was already within 3 tachim of the ground by the time he realized. The fact that it's within 3 tachim of the ground is not called landed, and it's not called usher. Now the Gemara says, well, I could see that from Rav Yochanan, that within 3 tachim of the ground is not called landed. And the Gemara says, no, that's Rav Yochanan's case where it's still being blown by the wind. But in this case, which Rava's halacha applies to, it's landing straight down, and it's going to land in that exact spot. And therefore, if not for Rava, I would have assumed that it could still be considered to be landed, even though in Rav Yochanan's case where it's held by the wind, it's not considered landed just because it's within 3 tachim of the ground. And this takes us to our next Mishnah. The Mishnah discusses the halacha of the Yam, the sea. It will tell us the basic halacha, and then it'll talk about where a extension of the sea extends into dry land and crosses through a Rosh Hashanah, through a road. What's the halacha there? And then the Mishnah will apparently repeat the same halacha twice, and then we'll all try to figure out what the repetition's for. First of all, the halacha of the Yam is that it's a karmelis. It's not Rosh Hashanah or Rosh Hashanah, it's a karmelis. If somebody throws an object 4 amos within the sea, it's not an Issa D'Oraisa, it's an Issa D'Rabbanan, throwing in a karmelis. Now, if a finger of the sea, shallow water, extends across a public road, so it's extending across a Rosh Hashanah, so what's the halacha there? So if the water that's crossing the road is less than 10 tvachim deep, it's still called Rosh Hashanah, and all the halachas of Rosh Hashanah apply. If, however, it is deeper than 10 tvachim, or 10 tvachim itself, then it is not a Rosh Hashanah. It's a machlokes rishonim whether it's a Rosh Hashanah or a karmelis. Then it repeats it again. If you have shallow water crossing the road, then it counts as Rosh Hashanah, assuming that it is not too deep. So the Gemara says, why is this repeated? So first of all, the Gemara separates into 2 things. We say that the road goes through the water. Why do you repeat that expression? So the Gemara says, that I understand. First you're telling me the road goes through the water to tell me that if somebody walks on that, to tell me that a road that passes through an area where it's difficult to walk still counts as a Rosh Hashanah. And then you repeat it again to tell me that's only a place where people walk. An area like a road where people use it as Rosh Hashanah for walking, that stays halachically a Rosh Hashanah even though it's difficult to walk there. It's difficult to walk through the water, but still people walk there. If, however, it serves Rosh Hashanah and it serves the Rabbim in other ways other than walking, like it serves them for storage, or it serves them for shifting the weights that they're carrying, but it's difficult to serve Rosh Hashanah. It's not convenient. It's usable, but it's inconvenient. That would not count as Rosh Hashanah. It's only walking, only hilach, only walking, only passing through something like water, which stays a Rosh Hashanah even if it's difficult to use. Other uses of the Rabbim do not apply if they're difficult to use. So now I understand why that's repeated. However, why is the second bit repeated, where about the pool of water, people walk through it? Why do I have to repeat for me that people walk through, that the pool of water is there? I have to repeat that. So the Gemara offers 3 answers as to why we would repeat that. So the first answer is Rava. Rava says it's to tell me that both during the summer and during the winter, walking where the road passes through the pool of water, it still counts as Rosh Hashanah. Why would I think there's a difference? Because during the winter, the streets are full of mud. So you may think people don't care to walk through the water. Worst comes to worst, they'll wash the mud off their shoes. But during the summer, maybe not. And during the summer, it's very hot. So people may appreciate walking through the nice, cool water. But maybe during the winter, they wouldn't want to. Therefore, I have to tell you that in both situations, the summer and the winter, it still counts as Rosh Hashanah and people still walk through it. Now, Abaye says, I need to tell you to stress that the pool stays Rosh Hashanah because even if it's less even if it's only 4 amos wide and it's easy for somebody to walk around it, still people stay on the road and they walk right through it. And Rav Ashi says, I need to stress that even if it's less than 4 tvachim wide and it's easy for somebody to jump over it, still there are a lot of people who will walk through it, and it counts as Rishus Harabim, and that's similar to another halacha that Rav Ashi said. If you're walking along a bridge, which is a Rishus Harabim, and there's a plank of wood which is separated from the other one. So a lot of people will jump over it because they don't want to step on a shaky plank. But since many people will step on it, it counts as Rishus Harabim nonetheless. Next Mishnah discusses the halacha of transferring an object from the sea to the land or from the sea to a ship and vice versa, and then from ship to ship. The Gemara will discuss how you're allowed to draw water into a ship from a ship that's at sea, and how you're allowed to pour the wastewater off the ship. Okay, so first of all, the Mishnah says if somebody throws an object from the sea onto the dry land or vice versa, or from the sea to a ship or vice versa, so that is an Iser D'Rabbanan, because the sea is a Carmelis. Now, from ship to ship is also an Iser D'Rabbanan, unless the ships are tied together. Then you can make an Erev between the ships. You can have an Erev Chatzeris, and they're all considered one, and you actually walk from ship to ship, and it's completely mutter, either because they all belong to the same person, or because you have an Erev Chatzeris. If, however, the ships are floating near each other, even if there's no gap, you can't make an Erev Chatzeris, and you can't carry from one to the other because we're afraid they're going to spread apart, and you'll end up crossing a Carmelis. Okay, now the Gemara says, how do you draw water onto a ship? This applies to a ship that's in fresh water, so it's drawing drinking water. The Gemara says, Rav Huna says you have to stick out a beam out of the side of the boat, and that's all you need to do. Then you can draw water from a bucket. Rav Chisda and Rabba Bar Rav Huna said, no, you have to make 4 walls. You have to make a exemplary, symbolic Rishus HaYachid. You construct an area 4 by 4 tefachim with walls over the water. And so Machlokes Rishonim if it has to extend 10 tefachim down or not. Okay, now what's the reason here? So according to Rav Huna, all you need is the beam. Why? Because you measure the height of 10 tefachim, which is the limit of a Carmelis, from the sea floor. Therefore, the surface of the sea is already above 10 tefachim. The Gemara will ask what if it's shallow water, but it's above 10 tefachim, and you're not really drawing water from a Carmelis. You're really drawing water from a Malkum Patur. Why do you need the beam? So you need some kind of a symbol, because it doesn't look like it's a Malkum Patur. It looks like it's a Carmelis. You do not see that you are drawing water from a Malkum Patur. You do not see that the surface is really above the seafloor. Therefore, you need a hecker. You need some sort of an indication this is different than a usual situation. Now, Rav Chisda and Rabba Bar Rav Huna say, no, you measure the water from the surface of the sea. And therefore, when you're drawing the water, you're drawing it from a Carmelis, not from a Malkum Patur, and you need to construct those 4 walls so that you're drawing from within them is drawing from a Rishus HaYachid into the ship, which is a Rishus HaYachid. Okay, now the Gemara says, what happens if the ship is sailing in shallow water? So it's less than 10 tvachim to the seafloor. So the Gemara says, Rav Nachman asked this to Rabba Bar Avuha, and he answered, Rabba Bar Avuha, and he answered that it's not a problem, because the word that's used here is Sfina. Sfina is a big ship. Those don't sail in less than 10 tvachim. They lie too low in the water. So the Gemara says, but what about the front edge of the boat, which sticks out of the water, the prow of the boat? The Gemara says, no, the sailors are careful, and they make sure that the prow doesn't get within shallow water that's only 10 tefachim deep either, because if they get too close, then the ship will beach itself in shallow water. Okay, now the Gemara says, according to Rav Nachman, according to Rav Chisda and Rabba Bar Rav Huna, that you have to make walls and draw from within the walls, how do you pour out the wastewater? You can't pour out the wastewater because that'll be from a ship into a Carmelis. And don't tell me that you're going to pour the wastewater in that exact spot, because then you won't be able to draw drinking water from there. So it says you pour it on the side of the ship, anywhere along the ship, and it flows off the side. So says, but what do you mean? But if you poured it off the side, then it's running into the sea through your action. That's not okay. That's also carrying. You don't view that as if it falls on its own. So Gemara says, no, in a Carmelist that halacha doesn't apply. In a Carmelist you're allowed to pour and is allowed to run out on its own, even though it's through the strength of your pouring action. And we have a brisa that illustrates that. There's Rabbi Yehuda, who says that if you have a ship that is as follows, it's from the sea surface to the top of its walls are less than 10 tefachim, but inside the ship the walls are more than 10 tefachim high. So he says you're allowed to carry from the ship out to the sea, but not from the sea into the ship. And says, how does that make sense? If the sea is a Carmelist and the ship is Rishos Yachid, what's the difference which direction you go? So it must mean from the ship out to the sea, he means you're pouring water on the side of the ship and you're letting it run down. And that's okay, because going to a Carmelist, there's no problem with the fact that it's running from the strength of your hands.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.